Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev says the Azeri army has liberated 7 more villages from the Armenian occupation. Meanwhile, ethnic Armenian forces said 51 more service personnel have been killed in the conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Earlier, Turkey rejected Armenia's demands for a ceasefire after a week of fierce fighting. Britain and France have posted record high rise in daily coronavirus cases since second wave of the pandemic. In a video, US President Donald Trump says he is doing well, but the next few days will be the real test. Meanwhile, India has recorded 940 deaths and nearly 76,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. Here in Pakistan, 6 more people have lost their lives to the virus, raising the toll to 6,513. While globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1,031,000 lives and infected 34.7 million. Thousands of Israelis have defied a ban on anti-government protests to demand Prime Minister Netanyahu's resignation. Police said 38 protesters were arrested as they gathered near Netanyahu's residency and over 1,000 other locations across the country. They were calling for Prime Minister's ouster over his corruption-related indictment and mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's start the news in detail. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev says the Azeri army has liberated 7 more villages from the Armenian occupation amid fierce fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Aliyev said that Azerbaijani soldiers have also hoisted the flag over the town of Madagiz. The Azeri president added that he had reinstated the town's historical name, Sugu Vushan. Meanwhile, ethnic Armenian forces said 51 more service personnel have been killed in the conflict. Earlier, Turkey rejected Armenia's demands for a ceasefire after a week of fierce fighting. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said Russia can play a mediating role in a ceasefire only if it is neutral. The dispute is centered on the control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but controlled by the ethnic Armenians. Now, Britain and France have posted record high rise in daily coronavirus cases since the second wave of the pandemic. France reported 17,000 new cases with 49 additional deaths, while in Britain, the Health Ministry reported almost 13,000 new cases. Meanwhile, India has recorded 940 deaths and nearly 76,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. The Indian Health Ministry said the infection tally has crossed 6.5 million, while the death toll has reached over 101,000. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1,031,000 lives and infected 34.7 million. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says he has been feeling better since he arrived at the military facility, but next few days will be a real test. President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump have been in quarantine after testing positive for COVID-19. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows reportedly said next 48 hours will be critical for President Trump. He said President's vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning and he is yet to be on a clear path to recovery. President Trump said the physicians will know his condition for sure in a few days, but he hopes to be back soon.
Choice, because I just didn't want to stay in the White House. I was given that alternative. Stay in the White House, lock yourself in, don't ever leave, don't even go to the Oval Office. Just stay upstairs and enjoy it. Don't see people, don't talk to people, and just be done with it. And I can't do that. I had to be out front, and this is America. This is the United States. This is the greatest country in the world. This is the most powerful country in the world. I can't be locked up in a room upstairs.
Meanwhile, White House physician Sean Conley said Trump has been fever-free for the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 6 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 6,513. The Health Ministry says over 600 more tested positive overnight. It said there are 9,135 total active cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 314,000 detected cases, more than 298,000 have recovered so far. It said over 138,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while over 99,000 reported in Punjab so far. The National Command and Operations Centre says 95 people across the country are on ventilators. Now, Indian investigators have exhumed the bodies of 3 young men in Western Baramulla district of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This comes 2 weeks after the Indian military, in a rare admission, said its soldiers exceeded their legal powers in killing the men. Police said their team and medical officials handed the bodies over to their families for burial. The father of one of the victims said the 3 were killed in cold blood. Occupied Kashmir has been reeling under a curfew ever since India revoked its special status last year. Dozens of Kashmiris have been killed at the hands of Indian troops in fake encounters. A notorious Emergency Powers Act allows Indian forces to search and even shoot suspects without any prosecution. For years, Kashmiri civilians and activists have accused Indian troops of abusing their powers and repeatedly targeting innocent civilians. Moving on now, thousands of Israelis have defied a ban on anti-government protests to demand Prime Minister Netanyahu's resignation. A new law bans Israelis from holding demonstrations more than 1 kilometer from their homes and forces stricter social distancing. Violence broke out at a handful of protest locations among over 1,000 throughout the country. A police spokesperson says 38 protesters have been arrested as they gather near Netanyahu's residency for the 15th straight week. The demonstrators called for Prime Minister's resignation over his indictment and his mishandling of COVID-19 pandemic. Netanyahu is on a trial for bribery, fraud and breach of trust. Now, Hamas has called for speeding up intra-Palestinian talks to reach a national roadmap for achieving reconciliation. Last month, the group held talks with its rival Fatah in Istanbul to discuss ways of achieving a partnership between the two. In a statement, Hamas said the meetings constituted a prelude to a comprehensive Palestinian dialogue. It called for creating a favorable atmosphere to reaching solutions to the outstanding issues as a step towards unity. The talks came almost 3 weeks after the Palestinian factions agreed during meetings in Ramallah and Beirut to hold free and transparent elections. Moving on, French-Iranian academic Fariba Adelkhan has been temporarily released from prison and is currently in Tehran. According to her lawyer, Adelkhan has been released with an electronic bracelet and is now with her family. Her attorney said he hopes this temporary release will become final. A research director at Sciences Po University in Paris, Adelkhan was arrested in June last year. She was sentenced in May to 5 years in prison for allegedly conspiring against national security. Adelkhan is a citizen of Iran and France, but Tehran does not recognize dual nationality. Meanwhile, Iraqi forces have arrested 26 suspected ISIS militants in a security swoop in the northern Nineveh province. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the militants were detained after receiving information from terrorists already in captivity. The statement said the suspects confessed of carrying out terrorist attacks against the security forces. In 2017, officials in Baghdad declared the military presence of ISIS in Iraq and had been all but destroyed. But the terrorists still have a presence in rural areas of Anbar, Diyala, Kirkuk, Salatin and Mosul. The Iraqi army continues to carry out operations against the groups in parts of the country. Now, the Human Rights Watch says Rohingya Muslims are being subjected to institutional oppressions in Myanmar's detention camps. In a statement, the international watchdog said the Myanmar government is committing grave rights violations in confinement centers. It said about 130,000 Rohingya are detained in the camps since being displaced in 2012 campaign of ethnic cleansing by Myanmar's military. It added the conditions amount to the crimes against humanity of apartheid, persecution and severe deprivation of liberty. Human Rights Watch urged Naypyidaw Dao to lift all arbitrary movement restrictions for Rohingya, Kaman and other minorities. Now, Belarusian security forces say they have detained 11 people for participating in what they call unauthorized protests in Minsk. A spokesperson for the police said no journalists were among those detained during the latest protests. This comes after the United States slapped sanctions on 8 Belarusian officials, including Interior Minister Yuri Konoyev. In a statement, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Belarusians' democratic rights have been met with violence from officials. The European Union has also blacklisted 40 officials accused of rigging August presidential elections in Belarus. Responding, Belarus announced its retaliatory sanctions against the European Union. The Foreign Ministry said Minsk believes in dialogue but is determined to respond to unfriendly actions. Meanwhile, Germany says the European Union will have to impose sanctions on Russia if it is confirmed that ALEXEI Navalny was poisoned with a banned nerve agent. In an interview, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said there will be a clear response from the EU with no way around sanctions. Maas said such a serious violation of the International Chemical Weapons Convention cannot remain unanswered. Berlin claims Navalny was poisoned with a substance from the Soviet-developed Novichok group. The European Union is awaiting the conclusion of an investigation by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons before taking any action. Earlier, Russian said German Foreign Ministry has refused Moscow's request of consular access to Navalny. Now, 2 people have died and at least 25 are missing after the powerful storm Alex hit southern France and northwestern Italy. The storm's high-speed winds and torrential rains have caused severe floods in Italy. Local government officials say 17 people are missing in Italy, including a group of at least 4 German trekkers. Roads and bridges have been swept away by floodwaters as several rivers overflowed their banks. In France, authorities say 8 people are reported to be missing. The Met agency, Météo France, said 450 millimeters of rain fell in some areas in just 24 hours, which is equivalent to 4 months of downpour. Meanwhile, in the U.S. state of California, fire crews have adopted a defensive stand and are battling nearly 24 wildfires burning in the foothills of Napa Valley. The National Weather Service has forecasted a return of high winds and hot weather over the next 2 days, sparking fears of uncontrolled fires. The emergency officials said more than 2,500 firefighters are battling the grass fire that broke out on Sunday. They said the blaze has destroyed 248 homes and other structures, with 52,000 residents asked to evacuate. The officials said only 5% of the grass fire has been contained so far. The 2025 season in the U.S. has so far killed 30 people in California since August 15, while 10 have died in Oregon and Washington. Welcome back. Now, the United States has conducted military training and reconnaissance drills around the Korean Peninsula amid rising tensions with China. This comes after Beijing simultaneously has military drills in the South and East China Seas earlier this week. American Pacific Air Forces said U.S. Air Force conducted the Joint Bomber Task Force with the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force in the East Sea. It said the bombers also conducted joint training with a U.S. Navy Growler and electronic carrier-based aircraft. The American Navy also deployed its reconnaissance aircraft above South Korea's western shores. The training comes amid fragile inter-Korean relations and an upcoming North Korean military parade. Now, a week-long holiday in China is full of celebrations across the country. Authorities say a total of 108 million domestic tourist trips have been recorded so far, with tourism revenue reaching 76.5 billion yuan. What festivities made Chinese travel in this report?
Celebration vibes are full on in China's holidays that started with the National Day and include the Mid-Autumn Festival. Light shows, carnivals, food festivals and group weddings, every event has been spectacular. Group weddings for some 300 couples were held simultaneously in 7 places in northwest China's Shaanxi province. Couples holding the national flags mixed National Day celebrations into the ceremonies.
As we were occupied with our work previously, we did not have a wedding after we obtained our wedding certificates. So this wedding today also realized a dream of mine. I think this is a quite memorable day.
In the coastal city of Weihai in East China's Shandong province, a fresh oyster festival was put up, which attracted foodies and tourists to feast on. In another food festival, villagers gathered to have noodle together, as noodle symbolizes longevity in the Chinese culture. Over in Wuhan, Chinese cultural items including paper cuts, clay sculpture, and oiled paper umbrella are being offered to tourists.
Wuhan's epidemic situation is now under control, and the city will open all its scenic spots to tourists for free as a gratitude to the people's support in our fight against the epidemic. As an inheritor of intangible cultural heritage, I hope to make my part of contribution.
Other than delicacies, sightseeing is being popular too. The second longest river in China, the Yellow River is one of the places that has drawn a huge number of tourists.
Well, now a group of Palestinian teenagers have been practicing parkour in the blockaded Gaza Strip among the damaged buildings and rubble. Despite the opposition of their families, they resumed their urban activity, which involves climbing and running over buildings and grounds. Details in this report.
Leaping on a building and flipping through the air, jumping over obstacles, these Palestinian parkour athletes hope to make a name for themselves. The boys are leaping to new heights without formal training.
I have been doing parkour for 2 years. Now I'm 14 years old. We have to prefer these abandoned areas because there is no alternative.
Despite the opposition of their families, they resume their activity, which involves climbing and running over buildings and grounds. They have another obstacle which they must leap over, that is the lack of support and facilities.
We gathered for training in an abandoned area close to everyone. We don't have a stadium or a club. We prefer such demolished places to demonstrate our sports. We couldn't find anyone to support us.
In spite of Israeli blockade of Gaza Strip and West Bank, the determined group of parkour athletes resumes the urban activity. Palestinian authorities say Israeli airstrikes have damaged thousands of houses in the Gaza city. Some 65,000 Palestinians were left homeless in Gaza, where infrastructure was badly damaged due to the attacks.
Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.